Hi, I'm Dave Wilkinson, Executive Director of the Tobin Center for Economic Policy. I'm thrilled to be here today with Professor Zachary Liscow, professor at Yale Law School and a PhD economist. Your scholarship has been among the economic scholarship most cited in this emerging conversation on supply and abundance. What do you see as the barriers facing those who are interested in advancing abundance and supply-focused strategies in the policy arena?
Yeah, I think there are multiple barriers. One is the politics of it are tricky. That's not my biggest expertise, so I'll leave that mostly to others. But part of it, I think, is legitimately, in some cases, a paucity of academic research. So taking the example of the cost of building transportation infrastructure, before a few years ago, we did not know the fact that the cost of building transportation infrastructure increased dramatically over the last several decades. To take the example of other people's work, we did not know that it costs a few times as much to build transit infrastructure in the United States than in other countries. And these facts are very motivating. Knowing that there is a problem to solve is motivating for trying to trying to find solutions. Once you kind of know these high-level facts, you then need to dig in and find the specific causes, and that's hard. And it takes years to figure out, and we're kind of just beginning that work. So I'm hopeful that over time there will be more and more economics research, academic research to help solve these problems.
What do you think the role of states are in beginning to test solutions in this policy domain?
I think states are extremely important. My law students at Yale Law School are overwhelmingly focused on the federal government, but in the area of abundance that I know the best, transportation infrastructure, the action overwhelmingly takes place at the state. That's also true of housing. Action is overwhelmingly at the state and local level. The fact is, the federal government, by and large, does not build transportation infrastructure. It's built by the state government, and it's built by the local governments. And my research has shown that there's lots of reasons to think that our state governments are understaffed and that they do not have all the capacity that we would hope that they would have to be delivering infrastructure on time and on budget. And my hope is that over time we can focus more and more on the states because they're so crucial in a whole range of arenas.
So we are at a national strategy summit with policymakers, industry, and many of the nation's leading climate and energy economists. Ali Zaidi has encouraged economists to work more at the micro level, at the state level. How can economists help states advance smarter transportation policy?
I've been working on this, so let me give you an example of one paper that I think does this, and I'm hopeful that others will produce dozens more. So my co-author, Kaylin Slattery at Berkeley, as well as Will Nober at Columbia, terrific PhD student, painstakingly collected data across the country on the cost of building highways. So one aspect of state capacity that is lacking is data. Like, we had to FOIA each state and individually get them to give us this data.
So that's using the Freedom of Information Act.
Yes. Ideally, this would be on their websites, and this data set should already exist, but it doesn't. In any case, we got the data. We then surveyed the states about their practices, and then we saw what correlated with higher costs. And here's what we found. We found that one significant predictor of lower costs is when states advertise, saying, hey, we need to repave or rebuild this highway. Many states actually don't do that. Most states actually don't do that. States that do have lower costs. Another example, states that have fewer limits on subcontracting of contracts. So we're getting in the weeds here. states that have fewer limits on subcontracting of contracts have lower costs. What happens when you have fewer limits on subcontracting? Well, it lets more people enter to bid because a given contractor may not be able to do everything to build the highway. If they can subcontract out the parts that they can't do, you can bring in more contractors, increase competition, and lower costs. We also showed that states that have more personnel per capita have lower costs. They have more capacity. California, which is an all-star here in terms of data, we showed that in particular when 1% of their engineers for building transportation retire, 1%, costs go up by 4%. So it's a huge deal when an extra chunk of their employees retire. Obviously very relevant now for the conversation on DOGE and encouraging lots of employees to, especially experienced employees, to retire. So here's what this says to the states. When we're able to use your data, here's what we see. We see that you should be advertising more. We see that you should probably be hiring more employees, since if you hire fewer, you're going to be penny wise, pound foolish. And you should really consider loosening restrictions on subcontracting so you can bring in more competition. Data can really show what drives up costs, what drives down costs, and here's one example of that.
Zach, you were the chief economist at the White House Office of Management and Budget. You know about budgeting, you know about clearly permitting. Is there a role for economists in informing that conversation?
Yes, absolutely. A key input into what gets passed by Congress is whether policies increase the budget, or increase the deficit, or decrease the deficit. Currently, methods are not good for knowing whether that happens or not. And there could be a huge amount more research now into knowing whether policies like passing permitting reform increase productivity, thereby increasing economic growth, and thereby reducing the deficit. There will be a debate with high likelihood on permitting reform in Congress in the next few years. There already has been to some extent over the last couple of years. One of the key ways by which members of Congress assess a policy is its impact on the budget. If it increases the deficit, that's bad, all else equal. If it reduces the deficit, that's good. Currently, the scorekeeper in Congress is the Congressional Budget Office. And currently their methods, and I don't think they would disagree with this, kind of don't take all of the impacts into account of policies like permitting. So the way they currently assess permitting is if you have a permitting bill that makes it easier to build, and there are government subsidies for building, then the policy will cost a lot of money. That'll make it harder to pass the bill. But part of what happens when you make it easier to build is that you have more electricity, so electricity is cheaper. Or you build more transportation infrastructure, so it's easier to move goods and services. Both of these things increase productivity. Productivity is hard to measure, so it's totally reasonable for the Congressional Budget Office to not incorporate this, but they do not. The impact on productivity is zero. So the impact of building more electrical infrastructure on prices of electricity in your house is zero. And so this is the kind of thing that would be really great for economics researchers to do more work on. So once you know that this budget impact is extremely important for whether things get passed, I'm hopeful that as one small part of economics research, folks can do this, I think, small piece of translating that into impacts on productivity that can then be used by budget scorekeepers, which could then have a pretty big impact on what's passed in Congress.
The challenges around infrastructure, whether energy, transportation, housing, these are long-standing challenges that have gotten worse and not better over time. There's been a lot of reason for pessimism that these will be hard challenges to solve and that there may not be a path. Does anything make you optimistic that we may be able to tackle these challenges in ways that gets us building again?
Yeah, so these are hard challenges, but what makes me optimistic is that we are in fact talking about these things now. The research and the kind of movement making that people have been working on for years is moving the needle in terms of what we're talking about. And the policy making is typically downwind of what we are talking about. And it's a big change. No one was talking about these things a handful of years ago, and now it's a big part of the conversation. So I'm optimistic that with time, these changes will translate into policy.